From AmeriVet Securities, a service-disabled, veteran-owned broker-dealer in New York City, we bring you Compass Check, a podcast created by veterans for veterans. The military uses the compass to navigate air, land, and sea. Now, Compass Check is here to help you navigate your transition into the corporate workforce. Our goal is to reach military veterans and members of the veteran community, empower and connect them with a multitude of resources that will ultimately set them up for success after leaving the military. I'm your host, Army veteran James Fitzgerald. Let's get moving. General Dynamics Bath Iron Works is a full-service shipyard specializing in the design, construction, and support of complex surface ships, from destroyers to cruisers, providing the U.S. Navy's most advanced, high-quality surface combatants for more than a century. Located in the northeastern United States in Bath, Maine, General Dynamics Bath Iron Works has delivered over 425 ships to the world's fleet since 1884, including more surface combatants than any other U.S. shipyard. My guest today is the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Program Manager for General Dynamics Bath Iron Works, Patrick Sentz. Here's our conversation. All aboard, as we set sail with another episode of the Compass Check podcast. I'm your host, James Fitzgerald, and I'm coming to you from Brooklyn, New York. And for those that do not know, right now in New York City, we are celebrating Fleet Week, New York City. This is our 35th occasion celebrating this, and it's really a great opportunity for the public and the community to come out and really get an idea of what our maritime capabilities are. New York City is swarmed with about 33,000 sailors, Marines, and Guardians to really bridge that gap between the military and civilian community for everyone to get that understanding. And you can't get a real understanding about our maritime capabilities without having a conversation with our guest organization today, General Dynamics Bath Iron Works. With me today to have this one-on-one interview for our special Fleet Week episode is Patrick Sentz, the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Program Manager for Bath Iron Works. Patrick, it's an absolute pleasure to have you join me here today.
Thank you for the opportunity, James. My pleasure.
We're going to jump right into it since we've already set sail. What I'd like to do to get us started is have the listening and viewing audience get an understanding of what it is to be the DEI program manager for Bath Iron Works. Can you give us an understanding of what that entails?
Absolutely, James. So first of all, let me say it's an honor to have the position. Just being able to serve the employees and those that are applying is really it's not really a job, it's a passion. So it's fun to wake up and do it every day. But really my position at Bath Iron Works, I kind of have dotted lines between talent acquisition and the ethics office. Just making sure that one, we're within compliance because we are a federal contractor. We have to follow OFCCP guidelines. So making sure that we're in compliance with who we're marketing our open positions to and things of that nature. And then obviously impacting culture. Happy employees are productive employees. And that's a big part of what goes into my job. Making sure that employees feel safe when they're working, both psychologically and physically. It's being a production and manufacturing facility. It's a tough environment, and there's a lot that goes into making sure that the employees are happy where they're at.
Sounds like you have a lot on your plate day in and day out. So before we dive into your day-to-day, what I'd like to do is take a step back and see if we can get a better understanding for this business unit of General Dynamics, the Bath Iron Works. Can you give us a quick down and dirty, like what is Bath Iron Works known for? Like what is the main component that connects it to our naval operations?
Absolutely. So Bath Iron Works is a major shipbuilder located in Bath, Maine, and one of the largest employers in the state as well. We're a subsidiary of General Dynamics, which is a top 10 defense contractor in the world. Founded in 1884 and on the banks of the Kennebec River up in Maine. BIW has built hundreds of private, commercial, and military vessels, most of which have been purchased by the Navy. Our current operations have us focused on designing, building, and maintaining the Arleigh Burke destroyer for the Navy, commonly known as the workhorse of the Navy. It's a amazing ship, and like you stated before, my position within that organization is not only just the DEI program manager, but I also manage all military hiring as well.
When I originally was approached and given the opportunity to interview you, but like as a big picture General Dynamics, I really felt like I was being visited by the ghost of Christmas past, because while I served in the Army, I was already introduced to General Dynamics during my service. I served in a striker unit, and so one of the subsidiaries that covers these striker vehicles is General Dynamics Land Systems.
Yep.
And I just remember the connection that we had with our military units as we would go in and do maintenance and care for these vehicles and also learn about them. We did it side by side with those that were active duty military with us, but also a lot of the General Dynamics personnel that were subject matter experts were working hand in glove with us to ensure that not only we were up to par with our knowledge, but also that we had a resource inside of them. And the common thread that I saw in all those individuals were that they were all veterans. And to come full circle now to have this conversation with you, who spoiler alert for my listening and viewing audience, Patrick's also a veteran, and we're going to get to that shortly. But it's one of those full circle relationships with an organization that you've been introduced to in one of the best sense that, hey, while I was serving and while I was working at this peak level of operation, one of the greatest assets that I had was this organization, General Dynamics. So now we're able to talk about this in a grander sense and include some of the other branches like Navy and Marines. And you're like the centerpiece to all of that. So what I'd like to do is to do a little dive into your military service. I know that you had a lengthy career in the U.S. Army, go Army, and I would just like the listening and viewing audience to get a little bit of an understanding about your service, and if you can give us a little bit of the journey from the military to General Dynamics.
Absolutely. So I did, like you said, spend quite some time in the Army, and go Army, as always. I will join you in that. But so enlisted originally as a 14 Tango, an air defense artillery guy, and after completing AIT, or advanced individual training, I'm still in love with my acronyms. I'll never be able to break that habit. Um, but you know, after that, my first duty assignment was Germany. Internally, I really didn't feel like I was doing enough, and an opportunity came up for me to deploy to Afghanistan. So
Wow.
went to Afghanistan for a year, and then after that, got stationed at Fort Hood. And conveniently enough, I was dating my girlfriend at the time, my now wife of will be 15 years this year. We're
Congrats.
doing pretty good right there. But we had just had lunch at Rose's Tacos, and I was stepped behind to go get my vehicle to go back to another one of many formations we had that day. And I got a phone call, and they gave me 5 minutes to decide whether or not I wanted to go to drill sergeant school or be a recruiter. And,
Wow.
a lot of thoughts go through your mind in that moment.
Right.
And so I really knew that I wanted to marry my girlfriend. So I had conversations with buddies who were on the trail being drill sergeants, and it just felt like recruiting was probably a better fit. And in recruiting, I found my place, I guess, really, and ended up sticking around in recruiting for almost 12 years.
Wow.
Yeah, did everything you could possibly imagine besides being a sergeant major in recruiting command. I was an instructor, station commander, multiple stations, first sergeant of Seattle Medical Recruiting Company. I mean, all around, I loved people. So, and this, when we talk full circle, you mentioned that earlier. My job at Bath Iron Works really became full circle, and I'll get there in a second. But
Mm.
when I got out of the Army, it's a big move from Washington State to Maine. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
it's
Oh
harder
yeah.
to move further if you're talking about the continental United States. But um, we made the move back. My wife's originally from Maine, so made the move back here with our two boys and two dogs. And just kind of we were winging it on the arrival.
Mm.
She was looking at some positions, but I really wasn't rushing into anything. And then I ended up, I wanted to focus on the kids. They were young, too, and
Of
they were
course.
they were young enough that I had some opportunity that summer to just focus on them. And eventually that led to me getting bored after they started school. So
Yeah.
I took a job with the Department of Labor, just working for the Jobs for Veterans State Grant, which is another great thing that if your listeners and viewers have the opportunity to look into it, look into it. It's another resource that's free. But Department of Labor took me on to do some work with them under that grant. And, this is just right after COVID really kicked off. So there wasn't a lot going on.
Oh yeah.
I got out of the Army March of 2020. So,
Ah,
yeah, you want to talk about tough transitions? That was a
interesting
tough one.
timing.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
to say the least, James, to say the least. But ultimately they were still doing a lot of those drive-through hiring events, and Bath Ironworks happened to request our parking lot. And I joke about this, but my boss that initially hired me into my original position in the talent acquisition department, when we first met, it was very much like when the brothers meet and Step Brothers for the first time.
Yeah.
Everybody was telling him that he should meet me. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
We walked up, we stood 6 feet apart from each other, and kind of threw. He asked me what I knew about certain things like Skill Bridge, and I fire back the policy and Doty that covered it, and he was like, "Oh, okay." So ultimately, that led to a deeper conversation, and they hired me on to originally focus on hiring military talent, which I think we're going to talk about later. So I'll save that. But and I jumped right in, and going now getting to the full circle portion of this. As a recruiter for all those years, talking to everybody about what it would be like if they took an enlistment as an opportunity to really set themselves up for success on the outside. And I laid that roadmap out for them. It was something I really was proud of while I was in recruiting, was focusing on giving them the multiple options and really drawing out a path. And now I'm on the receiving end. It's
Yeah.
like I get to go to these installations. I'm leaving for Seattle next week to go to a recruit military event out there.
Nice.
And I, as they funnel through, and you see the fear, but also that's coupled with excitement, and I get to be on the receiving end of that, and talk them through with no sugarcoating, straight answers, like
Yeah.
the ones that I didn't get, and especially the ones that I didn't get because of COVID transitions. That's really, really, really how I see it and what I've been up to, how I got here.
There there are a lot of stories about bad recruiters not telling individuals the full picture, the full scope, that full fountain of information. But I know that you were about that right business because a little birdie told me that you had some time here in the New York City area as well. Like you used to have Brooklyn as one of your old stomping grounds where you were recruiting out of Queens. So, like, of all the things New Yorkers like are about, like we're not about that BS. So, if you were putting that out, you wouldn't have been able to hit the numbers that you did. So I know that you're shooting straight, just like you're shooting straight today. But one of the main things that I want to actually two things that I want to highlight when it comes to transitioning out of the military, a lot of what we have to understand is wordsmithing. And I remember when I was a young NCO and they, had approached me about going to drill sergeant school or going the recruiter route. And I remember both of them were a turnoff to me because I didn't understand not only how they could set me up long term for career success inside the military, but also give me this set of skills that I could use when I transitioned out of the military. And something that you had mentioned while you were going through your journey, talent acquisition. If someone above me would have told me, "Hey, we're gonna train you to seek out and attain talent for the United States military," that would have come in an entirely different box than what they presented it to me. So to understand how we can really repackage a lot of the experiences that we had in the military, good, bad, or indifferent, for that transition out. And like you had a lovely story of how you're transitioning out, but incorporating all the other aspects that make up the holistic story, your family, where you're living at, where you want to live, commuting, all those things came into play during your story. And I appreciate you sharing all that with me and the listening audience. But the second thing that I definitely want to touch on is the wide variety of jobs that are available to us in the military doesn't matter. We're all successful as long as we lay down that pathway. And exactly as you said, what you started as in the military wasn't what really encapsulated your military service, and also it isn't what really springboarded you into what you're doing now, which I think is phenomenal. I think you're impacting the force in a substantial way, but also really exemplifying the skills and assets that you've come to attain over your time in the professional arena. So thank you for all of that. But I want to take that second part into our second segment, because a lot of what we're going to be discussing here today is how my listening and viewing audience, as they transition out, how they can walk that path towards a position with General Dynamics, Bath Iron Works for themselves. And just, I want to start at this point and demystify a little bit of the industry. There are positions that are a little bit more blue collar, the the ship fitters, the welders, the electrician, the fabricators. There are those professions, but there are so many more. There are financial analysts, there are designers, there are engineers, there are operators. So there's a myriad of different opportunities. And I just want to give us kind of a chance to explore some of those. Can you give us an understanding of some of the career opportunities that are available just within the organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, Bath Iron Works, we, we like to call ourselves our own little city. I
Mm,
mean, roughly 6,700 employees. I mean, we have our own security
wow.
department, our own fire department, our own medical department, information technology department, facilities department. I mean, it goes on and on and on and on. So, I mean, the possibilities are endless, especially like I mean, we have people that enter the trades as a general laborer and are retiring as senior planners that have kind of worked their way through the trades all the way into that position. But I mean, finance, we have finance opportunities. We have a strategic planning department, although it's very small. It's very few and far between the positions open and things like strategic planning, but we do have a department. Production is 100% our largest department.
Mm,
And crazy thing about the trades, it's kind of interesting actually. We have veterans that are coming out 20 years that have done something completely unrelated, military police, that have just always wanted to learn how to be a ship fitter or work with steel. So they enter entry level and they come work for us just because they want to do things like that. But it's, I mean, quality assurance, safety. So if you environmental health and safety background, we have an internal lab. Obviously safety, because it's a manufacturing facility. We've got to make sure that we're all within with OSHA requirements. Um, Engineering, lots and lots of engineering
yeah.
goes into shipbuilding.
Yeah.
um, so like, and we encounter those, we've got the veterans that are taking advantage of their internal tuition assistance and achieving these degrees. Project management, if you can get the paper that says project manager, that's one of the things that I constantly run into when I'm out there, is that self-titled project management, because of the position that they held, it doesn't directly transfer. So getting that, I get it that you've had projects and you've managed them, but I mean, it's just something that you've got to be very aware of when you're exiting service and entering the civilian market. The paper matters when you're applying to some of those positions. But program managers and project managers can go to any one of the departments. Really, it just depends on what they're looking for at the time.
I'm gonna piggyback on something that you just brought up because it is something very important. And this podcast has been going on long enough to where we've had multiple seasons. My first season was dedicated to helping transitioning veterans and their families understand the resources available to them. I'm gonna touch on that just for a second because something you had mentioned, the project manager, a lot of these certifications, we already have educational resources that can cover them. So as you're transitioning out, begin to look at how you can explore and leverage those educational resources so you can get some of these credentials that organizations like General Dynamics are looking for. It's not necessarily the 4-year college degree that's always getting your foot in the door. Sometimes it's just a little bit more of a certificate program that can give you that extra bump to separate you from the rest of the crowd that are applying for these positions. So always explore your benefits. And if you're not sure, make sure to ask someone, perhaps ask someone that's gone through that very process, like Patrick here. So, like everything about his story tells the tale of making those quick decisions, but having to do them with a long term thought process in mind. So, make sure if you have any questions, you can always comment. You can reach out to me when you see these episodes if you need a little bit more of assistance. But back to our regularly scheduled program. So, Patrick, uh, continuing on how veterans can connect with General Dynamics, I did some research and some of the things that I located. There are apprenticeships, there are internships, and there's also skill bridge. Uh, I definitely want to, at least touch on all three. But if we can hone in a little bit on skill bridge, um, we've talked about it before on our podcast, but to refresh everyone's memory, if you can give us a little bit of an understanding for what the skill bridge program is and how it works with Bath Iron Works.
You're gonna get me smiling. This is my
Oh,
baby.
this is what I want to do with every episode.
Yeah, so SkillBridge is my baby. That is originally what I was hired in to do at Bath Iron Works. But basically, to really make it brief and easy to understand, SkillBridge is an agreement between Department of Defense in the form of a memorandum of understanding, where they've vetted an organization, basically stating that they are a verified company that can participate in the program. They have to meet some requirements. You can go to the DoD SkillBridge website to look at those if you're an employer listening or viewing this and want to see how you can qualify for the program. And they do some videos or some live streams where they'll talk you through what it's all about as well. But very similar to a college internship in the sense that a college student will, between their whatever their school semesters, will go to a company for a period of time, and most of those are typically paid. Our internships at BIW are paid, but SkillBridge is a low risk internship focused on bridging the gap between military service and the civilian work environment. They draw all their pay from whatever military branch they're in for the entire time that they're in the program. And then the whole point behind it is for them to get industry experience, but at the same time have a high probability for follow-on employment at that employer. So it has a lot of flexibility in how you manage the program. I take a different approach than most to SkillBridge, but I found it to be successful, which is more of a placement strategy as opposed to an individual search. And by individual search, I mean someone going into our jobs website and really trying to pick through all the recs and identify a position that they think is good for them. A lot of things by title, people will disqualify themselves from it just because it sounds like they don't qualify. So you know, not necessarily uh, in its entirety is this true, because I use email and other stuff. But when I get a resume sent to me, I go straight to the manager of a department that I know has a need of a transferable skill that the military member will typically possess, and I can work my way around a lot of that blurred line in the recs. And so that's what that does for the service member, is gives them an opportunity to find a job that, one, they probably wouldn't have identified themselves. Taking, for instance, 74 Delta, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear specialist in the Army, and placing him into a quality assurance position. And now he's working in quality assurance for a procurement department. It's not
Wow.
something he thought he would have been doing. It's just the way
No.
that you can really navigate the roadmap of the vacancies that your company has, and knowing what the transferable skills are. It
It,
really just goes onto that.
it was interesting. I didn't see how you were connecting those dots, but like once you ended, I was like, oh, now I can see. But a lot of that is really exactly what our podcast is aimed for, to help those transitioning service members understand it doesn't really matter what you're doing right now. It's how you can be focused on what you want to move into and utilizing the resources available to you to make that happen. You've already given some great advice, but I'd like to see if I can pry just a little bit more. What advice would you give to a transitioning service member that's looking to utilize the Skill Bridge program, but maybe doesn't know where to start? What would your advice be to that service member?
So, period, point blank, one sentence answer: start networking now. A lot of service members that I speak to ask when they should start looking into employment options or start reaching out to employers. If you know you're exiting service, meaning like every service member knows this, that's out now. If you're listening to this, you wake up and all of a sudden it hits you, and it's, that there is a gut feeling you get when you know it's time to go. And when you get that feeling, don't hesitate. I mean, well, when you get that feeling and you finally make your decision, when you know you're exiting service, start putting plans on paper. And backwards plan, as corny as it sounds, you start it with what the end result is. What matters most? Is it dollar amount? Is it location? Is it the city? Is it the state? Is it whatever? Because everything else can be backtracked from there. The biggest thing that you want to identify is what matters most first, and then network around that. So if you identify that money matters, start doing your research on where the highest paid. It's too easy. There's too many websites. The .com era has changed everything. Now, I mean, that's a long time ago. We've been living off of computers forever, James. But
Like I still played the Oregon Trail, and like that was revolutionary in middle school when they brought out the green screen Apple computers. So like I understand the world before a lot of the conveniences that the World Wide Web has brought us. It used to be you would walk door to door and you would get a physical application and
at
fill it
100%.
out and turn it in. And like you would be lucky if the hiring manager was there and they got a chance to interview on the spot. But it's it's a little bit easier, but at the same time, it's harder. But I'm going to lean back on the advice that you gave to that service member that's wanting to utilize SkillBridge networking. Part of the reason why a lot of this is so hard for transitioning service members is lack of that network, and it's not reinforced soon enough because networking is on both sides of the uniform, like making sure that you have individuals that know your history when you were performing at your peak, to be able to reach back and say, hey, my company commander, my brigade sergeant major, those that knew me when I was at my best can give me these recommendations, can give me these suggestions, can give me advice, guidance, an additional bump that perhaps I wouldn't have gotten any other way. But then once I take off the uniform, that networking has to be kicked up a notch because now you're really in the arena and the lions are at the gate. And one of the things I know it was hard for me, and I'm sure it was hard for you, but like talking good about myself, being able to boast about my accomplishments and really lean into my achievements to say why I should be distinguished from my peers. It was hard for me to do that, but that's part of networking, is understanding that, yeah, you need to get in the room with them, but what are you going to say once you get the opportunity to speak?
It's funny. It's funny you should say that because this past, I want to say it was October or November. I don't know. I've done so many of these conferences that I mix up dates, but I had the opportunity to speak in front of a whole bunch of students at the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers,
Mm,
and it's the class was all about it was titled, I submitted my or you submitted your resume. What's next, right? And this will lead into some other stuff that I wanted to say in regards to the first part of your question earlier, but what after I was done, I was saying that, in my presentation, I was saying it's okay to focus on good, it's okay to focus on bad, whatever, whatever, whatever. And then I left it open for questions, and then I said I'll be upfront if anyone didn't want to ask a question, whatever. Well, it happened to be a young lady that I had identified early on in my presentation just by the backpack that she was carrying, that she was a veteran too. I called her out. I just stopped. Right? We have an easy way of identifying ourselves,
yeah.
but, and that's another good thing about the veteran community. But I honed in on her, called her out, asked her if she was a veteran. She was a Navy veteran. She was in an engineering program. So, I mean, it's a double whammy for me right
Yeah.
there.
Oh,
So she approached me afterwards, and she said that she had a difficult time talking about herself in a positive way. And the only thing that I could think to say in that moment was, like, I asked her, I was like, what's the difference between cockiness and confidence? And she looked at me and she was like,
mm,
I don't know. And I said, it's facts and evidence.
mm.
And I said, so, and then right then and there, I'm like, that's how you do it. If you have something factual that's significant that you can talk about and you are the one that caused it, why shouldn't you be able to talk about it freely? And that's what they're looking for. But at the same time, I revert back to what else I was saying whenever I say the good and the bad, right? You got to be able to do both, strengths and weaknesses and everything like that. But circling back to one of the things that you brought up a little earlier, and I know we're getting close on time, but
No.
no, all right, all right, all right. I won't say it again. Um, Everybody that's listening, that's put on a uniform, that's exiting service, know that your value is more than you possibly know. And I say that because the process that you went through enlisting into the military, the pace was something that you weren't used to at the time. It was high pace. They got you into the uniform. Now you understand it on the flip side. We need people in the military, and recruiters are tenacious in doing it. The
Yeah.
flip side to that is, as you're exiting service, the pace is not the same. So this is another full circle thing for me. Your talent pool widens. So like James and I we're talking about, or we're talking about, um, focus on the good stuff that you can talk about, and don't be shy about it. That's the stories that they want to hear. I mean, don't go in, talking about you deployed to Iraq 6 times and kicked in 50 house doors, and that right there might turn them off a
Yeah.
little bit. But if you develop things that translate, like team building is a huge thing that a lot of my managers want to hear about when they're hiring other managers or supervisors. Those little things that you can talk about that you're involved in. Community service goes a long way.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah,
I, I I've talked about this previously when it comes to organizations ensuring that they're creating an environment for the holistic self to show up to work. And a lot of what you just mentioned touches on that as well. To be able to come into an organization and know, yeah, they're paying me to do my 9 to 5, 9 to 6 job, but there's so much more that I have to offer. And I appreciate having these opportunities for service days. I can give back to my community next to those that I'm working with day in and day out. It gives me that next level of satisfaction to have employee resource groups inside of the organization, to know that there are specific issues that can be handled in a professional setting as well. Let's give space for that. There's also additional resources that I was able to find that General Dynamics leans on, especially with Bath Ironworks. Maine is a humongous hub for you all, the Boots to Roots. I thought that that was a fantastic nonprofit that you all partner with to help transitioning service members get ready to move into the corporate workforce. Like those are things that some of us need as we transition out to get some of those skills back sharpened and get us ready for the corporate workforce, but to also take part in things like Maine's Hire a Vet campaign. I think, having these types of initiatives that seek out that veteran talent, exactly what you've dedicated so much of your life to, that talent acquisition, to be able to have programs that spotlight the veteran community, I think is great. But that also takes us into new territory. We've been talking about this on and off during our conversation, but part of it is going to be the differences of that work life, that work environment, that company culture that we move into. And a lot of us in the military aren't able to really ask, what is good company culture, and know what the answer is. So I'd like to pose that back to you. You've been doing this for quite a number of years, being able to describe the various aspects of life with a large organization. You did it with the military, now you're doing it with General Dynamics. I'd like to know, in your opinion, what do you see as good company culture?
Uh, Good company culture for me, it really it really comes down to the employee experience, right? So a happy employee is a productive employee. Productive employees, it's just highly sought after first and foremost, right? Outside of that, like heavy involvement, like you said, in the community. When when the company pours out of
Mm,
the fences, I guess you would say, or the gates for us. Like I live an hour away. And so when I'm out grocery shopping on a Saturday and I go to Walmart and I see someone wearing one of our sweatshirts, that to me tells me they're proud of where they work because I
mhm,
know it's off time. So that's another one. Besides, um, employees being happy with where they're at, one being comfortable, two feeling safe. That's a big part of it. I mentioned it earlier, being psychologically and physically safe. Um, Safe when psychologically safe is specifically speaking to the fact that an employee feels empowered and that they can speak up and provide input without fear of negative consequences, right? So
mm.
that's an engaged team. And a team environment obviously is going to be better than 600 individual contributors walking into one room. So highly motivated and vocal labor force in my mind, because we're manufacturing. It's a good culture.
It was one of those things that I found remarkable as I was listening to you. Um, the pride thing really stuck with me. It really resonated because I know walking around each and every single day, I see a lot of representation. Usually, it's individuals' college where they went to school. They show that school pride where they wear the school memorabilia or their sports team from the college. You know, showing that pride, rooting for their team. But to your point, I think that that speaks volumes when someone is wearing their work apparel, something that represents where they work because of their pride, uh, wanting others to know, hey, I'm a part of not only this organization, but this team, this family. And a lot of us had those similar experiences while we were in the military. You had unit gear that you could buy to symbolize your specific unit, and they, sometimes it was mandatory that you bought it. But at the same time, when you wore it all together in a group, in a formation, it did give you that little bump of pride, knowing that, hey, like this little small part of the earth is mine, and like this is my family. I have their back, and they have mine. And I think overall, that's the message that you're applying right now to General Dynamics is we're a family, we're a team, and it's not just because we want you for this specific job, it's because we value the entire person that you bring to the table. And that's the talent acquisition that we have going on here today.
Yeah, and I mean, to be honest, bad culture does not sustain productivity. And if you're in an environment where people matter most, that's where you're going to find your success stories. So it's it's um it's my focus and my boss's focus to really impact that change. And you've mentioned employee resource groups multiple times, and that's something that we hadn't had recently. We've just written the policy for it, and we're going to go. Our intent by the end of this year is to have a fully functioning veteran resource group. It's our one of our first two identified. We've already started the groundwork on it. And there, I mean, the veteran community is chomping at the bit. I had 12 of my SkillBridge employees all in one room with our corporate vice president of diversity and inclusion from General Dynamics headquarters last week. And we all know how that can be when you get 12 veterans
Yeah.
into one room. But she had an opportunity to speak with them, right? And the one thing they did on the way out, of course, it comes with the elbows and the trash talk too. But they said, when are we going to get our resource group? And I said, it's coming. They're ready to do some great things. So I'm excited about what that's going to do.
And let's get you some additional veterans to really plus up this resource group. So eventually, like the veteran resource group can take over. But like in all seriousness, I know that just in my brief research, there were positions available with Bath Iron Works all around the country, all around the world. I saw, select positions in California, Virginia, Washington State. Um, there's a huge surplus of positions in Maine. I even saw some in Japan. But what I'd like to do is really focus in on Maine because General Dynamics Bath Iron Works is the largest private sector employer in the state of Maine. I think you had mentioned that earlier as well. So for me to you, one of the greatest gifts that I'd like to provide is to give you the opportunity to explain to our listening audience what they can do to get connected. Are there any kind of upcoming events that they can connect with? Are they able to find you on LinkedIn? Is there something that they can do to start the process or get things going on how they can start to join the General Dynamics team?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, by all means, if you want to add me on LinkedIn, feel free to do it. Reach out to me, even if you're not coming to Maine. Have no intentions of ever building a ship. Whatever I can do to help you in my spare time, I definitely will. But beyond that, if you're interested in General Dynamics, I am the chair of the military subcommittee for corporate. So I do communicate. Right now, we're kind of as we can get everyone together. Everybody's standing up some new programs, so we've all been really busy lately. But we try to meet at least quarterly, and there's a lot of left and right communication. I'll be out at this event in Seattle next week with NASCO from San Diego and Electric Boat out of Connecticut. So, um, but yeah, feel free to add me on LinkedIn. You can look me up, Patrick Sense. My last name is spelled SEN, as in November, CE.
Mm.
Um, you'll see my big smiling face with the black and gray pullover on. But feel free to add me on LinkedIn if you want to look up what we have open right now for vacancies. You can go to biwcareers.com. There's also a hyperlink on there that'll take you to our military page and let you see some of the stuff that we're doing, and some of the partners that we have, like James had mentioned, Boots to Roots earlier. They're a great organization. Ron Morgan, Bill Benson, they're Randy Bell, Dr. Randy Bell. They're great to work with. So if Maine is on your list, I reach out to that organization. They do everything from resume writing, connect you with loan officers. They'll do interviewing techniques. They've got all kinds of resources and volunteers, and it's an amazing organization, seriously. Um, but yeah, that's go to the military page. You can go to gd.com. That's the corporate landing page if you want to look at everything that's available across the board. Um, our headquarters is based out of Reston, Virginia, but with 10 subsidiaries, we're all over the country. So if you're looking to go anywhere, we're always looking for veterans. So those two websites are a great resource.
You all have your marching orders now. And if anything, definitely connect with Patrick on LinkedIn to go back to our earlier conversation about networking. And the key thing that Patrick brought up was start networking now. And these are resources that are readily available for you. And like, we're happy to help, but please utilize these resources. Listen to what we're talking about, but also ask questions. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and close us out. And I'm going to thank our guest for coming today to provide us with such a flurry of knowledge, but also a new opportunity to connect as we transition out of the military and into the corporate workforce. Patrick, thank you. This has been such a pleasure to talk with you during Fleet Week, New York City. It has been one of the highlights, but yet again, I can't thank you enough for everything that you provided our listening and viewing audience.
I appreciate the opportunity. Happy transition, everybody. Reach out. Love to talk to you.
And with that, we're going to go ahead and close things off. I've been your host, James Fitzgerald. Definitely tune in the next time as we continue down our journey as we transition out of the military and into the corporate workforce. See you next time. Thank you for listening to Compass Check with AmeriVet Securities. I've been your host, James Fitzgerald. See you next time.